The wind had teeth that morning. It bit through the wire fence and howled across the open stretch of land, pulling dust into small, trembling spirals. Elias Boone stood at the fence line, hammer in hand, hat shadowing a face carved by years of sun and silence. The boards creaked in the cold. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk screamed, a sound that felt almost human, like grief remembering itself. He paused to catch his breath and leaned against the fence post. Beneath him, the soil was dry and gray, ash-colored, like the sky before dawn. He had built this land from nothing but hurt and stubbornness. Once, there had been laughter here, the soft hum of his wife's voice drifting from the porch. But that was before the earth claimed her, before the cradle stayed empty. Now, his days were measured by the rhythm of chores. Fix the fence, feed the mare, boil the beans, sleep alone. By mid-morning, the sun had burned the frost away, and Elias saddled his horse for the town. He didn't like going there. Folks had long memories and longer tongues. Still, the general store was the only place to buy salt and nails, two things a man couldn't go without. He rode into Cedar Hollow just as the saloon doors swung open and a voice, sharp as glass, rang through the street. "Out, you shameless thing!" The marshal himself, Dutton, stood at the doorway, his hand gripping the arm of a woman. She stumbled onto the dust, her hair a wild storm of brown and gold, her dress torn at the shoulder. She didn't cry, didn't plead, just stared back at him with eyes like uncut amber, fierce, cracked, unyielding. Elias reined his horse near the hitch post, watching quietly. "She's been living upstairs for a week," someone whispered near the trough. "Claimed she could cook and clean. Turns out, she can't keep her hands off men's pockets or their pride." The marshal spat. "We don't need women like that here. Go on, get." The woman, Clara Wynne, though no one called her by name, stood there barefoot, holding what was left of her dignity in her arms, a bundle of clothes and an old shawl. Elias felt the old ache stir in his chest, the one that came when he saw something too broken to look away from. He dismounted slowly, not wanting to draw eyes. Still, the street went quiet as he walked toward her. She tensed, as though expecting another insult. He offered a small canteen of water. "You look like you could use this." Her chin lifted slightly, suspicion in every motion. "I ain't beggin'. I didn't say you were." For a moment, the air between them trembled. Her lips pressed tight, pride bleeding into hunger. Then she took the canteen, drank slow, like someone remembering how. "Thank you," she murmured, not meeting his eyes. Elias nodded and turned to leave, the townsfolk already whispering again. Behind him, her voice came, soft, raw, trembling from someplace deep. "Take me." He stopped. "I'll bear your children," she said. Not a plea, not quite desperation, but something stranger. Something like surrender. The world seemed to hold its breath. Even the horses shifted uneasily. Elias turned back, his face unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. "I ain't lookin' for that," he said quietly. Her gaze didn't waver. "Then what are you lookin' for?" He didn't have an answer. Maybe because the truth was too small for words, he wasn't looking for anything anymore. Not since the grave under the oak tree. Clara's expression cracked for the first time, shame flickering across it like the passing shadow of a bird. "Forget I said anything," she whispered, clutching her shawl tighter. "I got nowhere, that's all." Elias could have walked away. Any sensible man would have. Instead, he watched her cross the street barefoot, head high but trembling, and something about her reminded him of a wounded animal too proud to limp. By evening, he was back on his ranch, sitting on the porch with a pipe that had gone cold hours ago. The moon was a thin slice, pale and lonely above the cottonwoods. The sound of the wind against the boards felt different tonight, restless. He thought of her voice, the quiet crack inside it. "Take me, I'll bear your children." The words were foolish, maybe even mad. But they came from a place he recognized, the kind of emptiness that makes a person say things to fill the silence. He rose, restless, and walked the fence line again. The lantern light bobbed along the posts, chasing the night. Then he saw it, a shape near the far corner, slumped against the fence, half covered in dirt and moonlight. "Hell!" he muttered, rushing forward. It was her. Clara Wynne. Her shawl was tangled in the wire, her hands scraped raw, breath shallow but steady. She'd walked all this way, following the trail that led nowhere but here. Elias knelt beside her, feeling the heat of her skin against the cold night. "You damn fool," he whispered, though his voice cracked on the edge of worry. He lifted her carefully, like something fragile that might shatter from kindness. Her head fell against his chest, and for the first time in years, the cabin on Boone Ranch would not be silent. Inside, he laid her near the fire, covering her with an old quilt. The flames licked the walls, painting her face in copper and gold. Elias sat by the hearth, staring into the embers, the same color as her hair. The air smelled of ash and rain. Outside, the fence posts creaked in the wind. Inside, something long buried began to stir. Not love, not yet, but the faint, trembling shape of hope. Morning came softly, brushing the plains with silver light. The world outside still held its breath, the kind of quiet that comes after a hard wind, when everything is too tired to move. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned to coals. The woman on the cot stirred, her hair spilling across the pillow like smoke. Elias sat near the table, boots off, hat hanging from a nail. He'd been awake all night, half listening to her breathing, half listening to the old house remember its warmth. When she finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was him, not looming, not reaching, just waiting. "Where am I?" Her voice was rough as gravel. "My ranch," he said simply. "Found you by the fence last night." She tried to sit up, but winced at the pain in her leg. Elias poured her water, set it beside her. She stared at the cup a long time before taking it. "Why'd you bring me here?" He shrugged. "Wasn't right to leave you out there." She laughed, low and brittle. "Would have saved you trouble." Elias looked at her, really looked. Beneath the dirt and pride, she had the face of someone who'd carried too much weight for too long. "Maybe," he said. "But I don't sleep good knowing a soul's freezing by my fence." For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was the pop of wood and the soft hum of the wind brushing through the cracks. By noon, she'd eaten what little he had, beans and bread, the kind of meal that fills the stomach but not the silence. She offered to wash the bowl, though her hands trembled. "You don't have to." "I need to do something," she muttered. Elias nodded. He understood. Doing something, even the smallest thing, was how a person reminded themselves they still mattered. That evening, he went outside to check the fence line again. Clara, he'd learned her name from the small letters sewn inside her shawl, limped to the door and watched him. The light turned him into a silhouette against the sunset. Strong shoulders, slow movements, a man built from patience and loss. "You fix fences for a living?" she asked, half smiling. He gave a soft grunt. "Fences, barns, hearts, whatever breaks first." She looked down, the faintest flicker of warmth crossing her face. Days passed like slow-moving clouds. She stayed, saying she'd leave once her leg healed, though she never did pack. He didn't ask her to. They found a rhythm in the quiet, two ghosts learning the language of small kindnesses. When Elias mended her torn boots, she didn't thank him. Instead, she mended his shirt where it had split at the shoulder. Their gratitude existed in the doing. One evening, as dusk bled into violet, they sat outside watching the sun sink behind the far hills. The air smelled of sage and dust. "My father used to say women were made for bearing things," Clara said suddenly. "Children. Hunger. Men's tempers. He said a woman's worth was in what she could carry without breaking." Elias's jaw tightened. "Sounds like your father never carried much himself." She smiled faintly. "He carried a bottle. That's something." The wind moved her hair across her face. Elias looked at her, and for the first time, she didn't look away. There was no promise in that gaze, only recognition, quiet and human. Later that night, he found her standing near the small hill behind the house, where a wooden cross leaned slightly in the earth. "She's buried here?" Clara asked. He nodded. "Marianne. My wife. I'm sorry. She died bringing life that didn't stay." His voice was low, even. "After that, I stopped fixing the cradle. Some things ain't meant to be mended." Clara traced her fingers across the weathered wood of the cross, gentle as if touching someone else's sorrow. "You still talk to her?" "Sometimes," he said. "When the wind's right." They stood there, the air cool and still. Two people, each carrying their ghosts, their grief mingling like smoke. That night, thunder rolled in the distance, slow, hungry. The rain came heavy, slanting across the plains. Elias got up to secure the shutters and found Clara still awake, sitting by the hearth. "You should sleep," he said. "Can't." Her eyes were fixed on the fire. "That sound, it reminds me of the night I lost everything." He didn't ask what she meant. She didn't have to say it. The way her shoulders folded inward told enough. Without a word, he threw another log into the fire. The flames flared high, painting their faces in orange light. "I used to think fire only took things," she whispered. "But watching you burn that old shirt last night, I think maybe it gives too. It gives light. It gives a way to start over." Elias watched her carefully. "That shirt wasn't worth keepin'." She looked at him, eyes soft. "Maybe not. But it looked like it meant something once." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the poker, stirred the coals. A tiny ember leapt out, landing on the back of his hand. He flinched, hissed softly, then laughed under his breath. "What?" she asked. "Just thinkin'," he said. "Funny how sometimes it takes a little burn to feel alive again." Clara smiled, the first real smile since she'd arrived. "Then maybe we're both still breathing." Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming on the roof like an old hymn. Inside, the fire burned low, steady. Elias leaned back, eyes half closed. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and wet earth. Across from him, Clara reached toward the fire, her fingers hovering just above his on the poker. For a moment, they both held it, the iron, the heat, the trembling quiet between them. Ashes falling, hands almost touching. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The world outside was rain and mud and the whisper of past lives washing away. Inside, the flames breathed for them, small, alive, defiant. And in that quiet place between the storm and the heart, two broken souls began to build something new, one ember at a time. Spring came shyly that year, soft as a whisper, hesitant as forgiveness. Grass rose where the frost once lay, and the world smelled of wet dirt and promise. Elias Boone's ranch woke with it, the hens clucking again, the mare heavy with foal. And in the slow thaw of that season, something else began to bloom, not in the soil, but in the quiet spaces between two souls learning how to breathe in the same rhythm. Clara moved through the house like sunlight after a long storm, quiet, steady, unannounced. She tended the animals, swept the porch, hummed little songs no one had ever taught her. Elias never asked her to stay, and she never asked to leave. It was as if the land itself had chosen to keep her. They spoke little, but when they did, the words carried weight. "You ever miss the sound of town?" she asked once, her hands deep in the wash-bucket. Elias thought a moment. "No. Towns where folks pretend to be better than they are. Out here, you can't lie to the dirt." She smiled faintly. "Guess I'm learning to speak its language." For the first time in a long while, he smiled back. It felt strange on his face, like remembering a song he thought he'd forgotten. By late April, the town started talking. They always did. A woman staying alone with a widower? It was enough to stir the vulture hearts of gossip. The whispers reached even the marshal's ear, and soon, one afternoon, the sound of hooves broke the calm. Elias looked up from the corral to see Marshal Dutton riding in, dust trailing behind him like judgment. "Mornin', Boone," he said, voice smooth as a snake's back. "Got word you're keepin' company." Elias wiped his hands on his trousers. "I'm keepin' no one." "That's so." Dutton nodded toward the house. Clara stood in the doorway, hair tucked back, chin lifted but trembling. "You know how folks are," the marshal said, pulling a folded paper from his coat. "There's laws 'bout such things. Ain't proper, her livin' out here without family or vows. Folks might think wrong." Elias's eyes hardened. "Folks think wrong most of the time." "Still," Dutton continued, "if she ain't your wife, she'll need to come back with me to town. Find work, respectable like." Clara stepped forward then, voice calm though her hands shook. "It's all right, Elias. I'll go. You don't owe me anything." He turned to her, really turned, for the first time seeing the fear behind her strength. Something inside him cracked, not anger, not desperation, but a realization. He'd already lost once to silence. He wouldn't do it again. He stepped between her and the marshal. "You ain't talking her." Dutton's jaw tightened. "This what you want, then? To ruin what's left of your name for a woman you hardly know?" Elias looked at Clara. Her eyes met his, not pleading, not ashamed, just waiting to see who he truly was. He said softly, "She's the only thing I know that feels right." Dutton stared at him for a long moment, then spat into the dust. "You're a fool, Boone. Most men worth something are." The marshal left, muttering about fools and sinners, his horse kicking up the scent of sage and judgment as he rode away. When the sound of hooves faded, Clara's knees gave out. Elias caught her before she hit the ground. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "I didn't do nothin'," he said. "Just stopped lettin' others do my speakin'." She looked at him, really looked. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because maybe I ain't dead yet." And for the first time, she laughed, a real laugh, wild and warm and full of disbelief. The kind that made the world feel lighter for a heartbeat. A week later, under the oak tree where Marianne slept, Elias planted a sapling. He dug the earth with his bare hands, the soil dark and cool against his palms. Clara stood beside him, quiet. When he was done, he sat back on his heels. "What's it for?" she asked. He glanced toward the small cross, then at the young tree. "For what grows after loss." Clara knelt beside him, resting her hand on the damp soil. "That's a good thing to believe in." He looked at her hand, then at her. "You still want to bear children?" Her breath caught. She opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded once. "Not for the world's sake. For mine. To prove I ain't just what they said I was." Elias reached out, covered her hand with his. "Then maybe we prove it together." Time moved like the wind, gentle, unseen, shaping everything without notice. By the end of summer, the ranch looked different. The corral stood mended, the fields alive with grain. The mare foaled a chestnut colt, and laughter, soft, strange, new, began to echo through the house. When Clara felt the first stir of life within her, she told Elias by the hearth one evening. He didn't speak for a long time, just sat staring at the fire until tears traced silent lines down his weathered face. "Reckon she'd be proud," he finally said, glancing toward the oak outside. "She would," Clara whispered. "And I think she's watching." When the day came, the sky blushed with dawn. The air was heavy with heat and cicadas, the smell of hay and morning dew. Elias paced outside, hat in his hands, the midwife from town inside the cabin. The moments stretched like fence wire. Then, a cry split the stillness, fragile, piercing, alive. He froze, breath caught in his throat. Moments later, the door opened, and Clara stood there, pale but radiant, a small bundle against her chest. "She's got your eyes," she said softly. Elias stepped forward, touched the child's tiny hand, impossibly small, warm against his calloused finger. Something in him broke open, wide and bright. He didn't cry, not in front of her, but when he looked at the horizon, the world shimmered. That evening, they buried the afterbirth under the sapling, feeding life with life, as the old ways said to do. The wind carried the scent of dust and sweetgrass. Clara leaned against him, weary but glowing. "We'll teach her better than we were taught," she said. Elias nodded, voice a rasp. "We will. She'll know the world's wide enough for mercy." They stood there until the stars came out, the three of them, small beneath the endless sky. The oak whispered in the wind. Final reflection, narrator's voice. "Out here, life doesn't shout. It speaks soft, through wind, through dust, through the steady heartbeat of a rancher who learned that love ain't thunder. It's a slow-growing thing, born from ashes, watered by loss, fed by quiet hands that keep on building. So if ever you find yourself standing in the ruins of what you were, don't be afraid to plant something. Even if it's small. Even if it's just hope. Because one day, the wind will pass through it, and you'll hear it whisper back. You lived. You tried. And that was enough."